Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today, we're going to be talking about Dynasty Defensive Tackle Rankings with tiers. In our most recent video, we talked about defensive ends. If you haven't watched it yet, go ahead and check it out. Within the top 24, there will be no rookies because you don't know where they're going to be. So Joe and I have our rankings prepared, and we're ready to show you.
Hike!
All right, Joe. So who do you got in tier number 5?
All right. In tier 5 at 24, I've got Aleem McNeil, 23, Javon Hargrave, 22, Vita Vea, and 21, Kenny Clark.
Oh, boy. Already off to an interesting start. At 24, I've got Devontae Wyatt, 23, Cameron Hayward, 22, Grady Jarrett, and then 21, Javon Hargrave. So this is an interesting group, Joe. I really considered Aleem McNeil. I did not have him in my top 24. I totally understand why you have him in the top 24 because he's got a lot of potential. He's a young guy. I even remember, what was it, not this past offseason, but the year before that, Peter Schrager had him as his guy who, he has like a top 10 list of the players that he thinks are going to really break out. And, he was one of those guys that he thought that was really going to come on the scene. So I totally understand why you have him in there. I also, at the beginning of this, had Vita Vea and Kenny Clark. I opted not to put them in there just because, Grady Jarrett, man, people forget about him. He got injured, but in our league, he's going to be 31 years old. I mean, if you're a good defensive tackle, Calais Campbell is like 37, and he's still playing. So age for these guys is a really tough thing to measure. But based on our scoring, Jarrett has been defensive tackle 92 this past season, 11, 20, and 11. So this guy's right there, in a defensive tackle too, in my mind. So I felt like based on the stats, he has just done better over the past 4 years than Kenny Clark and Vita Vea. So I went ahead and put Jarrett in there. And then, Devontae Wyatt, you have him in the top 24?
I don't.
What made you not put him in there?
I just I thought he was interesting. I did consider it as I see, like, I went with Aleem McNeil at the back end, young guy with potential. I see Wyatt the same way. I guess maybe just because I like some of these other guys, just because they have the stats. No, that's not entirely fair. Just because this guy hasn't been in the league that long. But he does have a ton of potential. I guess I think just these. I think he's still possibly a couple years away from really turning things on. I feel like.
Yeah, well, I think he had 5.5 sacks this year, so he kind of took a next step forward. I felt like was kind of being rotated, wasn't really given a full-time job in my view. What made you put Vita Vea and Kenny Clark in here?
This was a tough group for me to rank here, and just looking in there. But ultimately, just kind of where they performed, I felt like they've been pretty consistent guys. They haven't been like, as far as in our league goes, they haven't been like really top end guy producers, but I feel like they just been, consistent enough to where I put them on here.
Yeah, they're not world beaters. And, Vita Vea specifically, his sack totals have been a lot better. His pass rush abilities has been a lot better. He was more known for just being this stout, big guy who's really good at the run. But he's been actually having a much better pass rushing ability. At least he's showcased it recently. So I totally get that. Cam Hayward, do you have him in the top 24?
Yep, he's still to come.
Okay, he's still to come. We'll hold off then. We'll wait. He was a tough one for me. He is unbelievable. In our league, he was defensive tackle at 64, and then before that, 229. This guy is unbelievable. He's going to be 35 years old. That's the thing. When is this guy done? I don't know. He has defied the odds for me. I didn't think that he would last this long and continue to be this good. So he was a tough one. I don't blame you. I didn't really know what to do with him. He's definitely deserving of the top 24. Just hard to balance that youth.
But then another thing with Vita Vea, Kenny Clark, they were 28, 29 years old. I felt like they were on the younger side than some of these 30-year-old players that they were battling. So I threw them in there. That was another reason as well.
Did you consider putting Hargrave higher, or you thought this was the right spot?
I did. He was
I did too.
Honestly, he was a tough player for me to spot just because, like, he had the good years with Philly, but then coming over with San Fran, I feel like he definitely. I mean, in the points this year, he definitely took a hit. And I mean, he's 31. Not to say that that's, we've seen plenty of guys play past that and be fine. I just didn't know what to do with him. He was a really tough player for me to put just because I don't know what to expect. Do I expect him to go back to what he did in Philly, or is San Fran just the new defense and this is going to be the new Hargrave?
Yeah, he's 31. He was defensive tackle 26 in our league. Then before that, he was 9'8" and then 43. Really strong in the Philly years. Thought he would do big better in the San Francisco defensive line, or just as good. So
yeah, me too.
He's a tough one. He's definitely deserving. But obviously you and I fell in the same boat. Who do you have for tier number 4?
In tier 4 at 20, I have Justin Jones, 19 Zach Allen, 18 Dexter Lawrence, and 17 Cam Hayward.
Oh my goodness. Justin Jones. Oh boy, I gotta hear this. Number 20, I've got Brian Bresee. 19, I've got Kalijah Cansey. 18, I've got Leonard Williams. 17, Zach Seiler. And then 16, Kobe Turner. All right, so Cam Hayward, we found him. He's number 17 for you compared to my 23. So that's a decent dip. You feel confident he'll play beyond this year? Or you don't care? You just, he's just that good.
Yeah, I don't know if he's going to play beyond this year. I just felt like, he obviously had an injury-shortened season here. I just felt he produced that well. And as far as point produced in our league, he performs at a really good rate, even though he isn't on the older end. And as you mentioned, I mean, Calais Campbell's 37 and still putting up good numbers. I don't know. I mean, Cam Hayward could have decided to retire after this year, but just felt like he was too good to not have him there. He was a guy I considered putting him up where you had him, but ultimately felt like I should put him here.
So there's a couple of guys that you and I don't have Justin Jones. I like to understand your logic on that one. That one was, as per my reaction, that took me by surprise.
Why not have Justin Jones on there? I mean, he's 27 years old. He's going to be, I mean, he's really the main guy there in Chicago. Had a couple of good seasons back to back as far as tackles, pass deflections, sack numbers. I'd like to see higher. I mean, he improved by 1.5 this past year. Think he could possibly get better.
Wow. What was his sack total? So if you're looking at it,
he had 3 last year and 4.5 this year.
It's not a lot, though, Joe.
No, it's not a lot, but
I mean, I guess he's been consistent over the past 3 years. Had 49 tackles and 52 tackles, which isn't a bad tackle floor.
Yeah.
I just that one took me by surprise. Now I had Bresee and Cansey. I know you're going to have Turner, long gone. He's coming, down the road here. So do you have Cansey and Bresee?
I don't have Bresee.
You have Cansey.
And I don't have Kalijah Cansey. Strongly considered him, but I don't have him.
Wow. Okay. I like both of these guys. Bresee, coming out of Clemson, he's a guy who, I mean, I always look for defensive tackles that have the ability for pass rush. That is something I look for in a player. Now, as we know, defensive tackles take a while to develop, but this guy already had 4.5 sacks in his first, season with the Saints. And on top of it, what I like about him is he's only 22 years old, so a guy's got a long time. So to me, I like Bresee a lot. I think he could be a really good player. Similar thing for Cansey. I liked Cansey a lot. He also is very young. Which obviously, this is, we're looking at this from a Dynasty IDP perspective. He's 23 years old. In his sack totals, he was at 4. I think both these guys are pretty explosive. I wouldn't be surprised if they bump up into a next tier here in the next year or two. It's probably 2 years because we know defensive tackles take a while to develop, but I think they've got a lot of potential. So I'm really surprised you have neither of those guys.
Yeah, I think they have a lot of potential. I mean, I like Cansey a lot more than Brian Brezzy. That's why he was somebody I considered. Brezzy wasn't on my radar at all. But yeah, I agree. They have a ton of potential, but just how much longer are we going to be able to see that potential be realized?
Yeah, we'll talk about Turner later because I'm going to be curious how high you have him. I'm really surprised how low you have Dexter Lawrence and the Broncos' Zach Allen. I've got them both in my top 24, but I have them, a little bit down the road here. That surprises me.
Why is that?
Well, I guess I'll explain my thoughts when I go.
Yeah, well, as far as Zach Allen goes, I mean, I was extremely disappointed this past season with him. He basically had similar stats that he did with Arizona Cardinals last year, only he had a ton more pass deflections, which really brought down his point total in our league. But I really thought staying with Vance Joseph and just coming over to the Broncos, staying in the same defensive scheme pretty much, that he was going to provide a lot more there, and especially in the sack totals, and it just wasn't there.
Interesting. How about Leonard Williams and Zach Seiler? You got them later?
Yes, I have both of them later.
Okay, yeah. Leonard Williams was one of the more difficult guys for me. Looking at what he's done, defensive tackle 10 this previous season, 37-3. He's going to be 30 years old, which you could still play well at that age at defensive tackle. I part of me wondered if I had him too low, but there were so many other guys that I kind of liked that I felt like I had to put in there.
That makes sense.
And then as for Kobe Turner, we'll talk about. He had a great season. I just wonder how much of it was benefited by Aaron Donald, and was it a flash in the pan? And once Aaron Donald's no longer there, is Kobe Turner going to continue to be that guy? That concerns me.
That's fair.
All right, man. A few words here for those two comments. So let's go over to tier 3. Who do you got in tier 3?
At 16, I've got Daron Payne, 15, Jonathan Allen, 14, Leonard Williams, 13, Zach Seiler, and at 12, Ed Oliver.
Okay, at 15, I've got Zach Allen, 14, Justin Matabuke, 13, Christian Barmore, 12, Ed Oliver, and 11, Dexter Lawrence. So I want to get this question out of the way first because I'm very nervous for your answer on this. Do you have Christian Barmore in your top 24?
Yes, Christian Barmore's in my top 24.
All right, because you don't have him yet, and I'm thinking to myself, we're at 12 and he hasn't said it yet. I'm like, oh boy, I'm very concerned about this. Okay, breathing a sign of relief because I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, I like Barmore a lot. I'll talk about him later here.
Good. Oh, I don't blame you. I think he had a career year. He really took the next step forward. So I think we saw him break out, and once that happens, things just start to roll downhill. So I like him. I had a hard time. This is a tough group. I obviously had Zach Allen higher than you. To me, he's been the model of consistency. In our league, the past 3 years, 13, 15, 12. And he's, be 27 years old. He's still got some room to grow. I know you're going to disagree with me on Matabuke, but my concern is I believe he's a free agent, and he was defensive tackle 2 for us this year. He's going to be basically around 27. Before this year, though, 29, 55, 102. I understand he had a career year in sacks, but he could very well this was just an anomaly, and he could just go back to the sack totals he was having before.
Yeah. Or he could keep building off of this, as you said. I mean, breakouts happen and it moves downhill.
I got that, but if he's not in Baltimore, does that not make you nervous?
It would, depending on where he goes, it does make me somewhat nervous for him. Yes.
Because he did not come in the league as this huge pass rushing specialist. I mean, he took the league by storm. No, I thought he could be good, and I took a flyer on him until I traded him like a dummy. But I mean, I don't think anyone saw him do this.
No, nobody saw this coming out of him. But I don't know. Yeah, we'll see where he goes. But I mean, yes, I'd be lying if I didn't say that. Depending on where he ends up, isn't concerning. But I just think if he continues to build off of this season, there's a lot more good to come for him.
I'm really surprised how low you have Allen and Payne. Just don't like the Commanders, or what was your thought there? Because I mean, Payne is going to be 27 in our league. He's been 11, 6, 10, and 12. That's pretty good.
Yeah, he's been pretty good. I liked both of those guys. I mean, I had trouble just where to put these guys, and I liked some of the other guys that later better. So
wow, that just surprises me because I mean these guys have been, and they have each other to feed off of too. It's not like they're the only ones. I mean it's the best defensive tackle group in football as far as I'm concerned because you've got two really above average guys in the middle. Although it sounds like Jonathan Allen's a little disgruntled based on what we heard at the end of the year. Let's see. What else have we got here? I'm not surprised that you're bigger on Siler than I am. You've always been a Siler guy. I'll tell you this, though. He is very underrated.
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't have a flashy name, so people don't think about him. But, I mean, he's a good ball player.
Yeah, I mean, he just performs, and I just looking at his averages in our league, and he's just been really consistent and getting better. So, yeah, I like Sealer a lot.
What's your take on Ed Oliver? We have them both at 12, so you and I didn't. I'm a Bills fan, though, so obviously there's like a level of bias for me. I tried to acknowledge that he's still young, so that's very promising. So, I mean, again, this is Dynasty, so he's going to be basically in between 26 and 27. But he had his best year in our league at D tackle 9. And he had a huge amount of sacks. Is this the breakout? Or I guess that's where – so you're feeling like it was.
Yeah, for me, I mean, it definitely seemed like a breakout. Obviously, he increased the sack total by 7. Also just had an increase in tackles as well. But, just watching the Bills play, I feel like he was just more noticeable. And the way he was really shedding and getting off of blocks, I feel like a lot of his plays, he was just wreaking havoc in the backfield. So I like what I've seen out of him. I think this is the breakout, and he could continue to get better. And who knows, he could possibly jump up a tier if he keeps playing like this.
I was also surprised by your disrespect for Sexy Dexy. I mean, Dexter Lawrence, I've got him at 11. You've got him at 18. You got him quite low there. In our league, he's been defensive tackle 18, 8, 24, 20. Guy's been the model of consistency. Early 26, going to be maybe 27 by the beginning of the season. The only thing with him is he's kind of came into the league more as I believe kind of more of a nose tackle type. So he's not necessarily, he's gotten better over the years. But was that your reasoning to have him a little bit lower, or I guess we haven't said the guys that you really like?
Yeah, no, I mean that was definitely part of it. But I mean, you said it. I mean, he's never really finished consistently in the top 10 or anything. He's mentioned 18, 24 in some of those spots. So I think he's a good player and deserves to be in here. I just liked these other guys ahead of him.
Yeah, I very much considered putting Matabuke, Barmore, and Oliver all ahead of him because of the breakout that I think they all had, that they could be stepping in. But he's just, Dexter has been consistent and he's been a good player.
Yeah, I mean, plus those other guys that you just mentioned, I think they have the better sack potential. I mean, he had 4.5 sacks last year, and the most he had was 2022-2023 season was 7.5. So,
all right, Joe, let's head over to tier 2. What do you got?
All right, in tier 2, at number 11, I've got Jalen Carter. 10, Kobe Turner. 9, Christian Barmore. 8, Derek Brown, and at 7, Justin Matabuke.
Okay. At number 10, I've got Aaron Donald. Number 9, I've got Jonathan Allen. Number 8, Deron Payne. 7, Jeffrey Simmons. And 6, Derek Brown. I could be getting some tomatoes thrown at me for this one. You could be too, for a different reason. But Aaron Donald was probably the toughest guy for me to rank. Obviously, I mean, he is a generational player at the interior defensive line position. I would easily have him within the top, I mean, he's been the one guy for so long. I just, with all his retirement things that have come up with him, I just don't know how long this guy wants to play. So it's hard for me to put a guy in the tier 1 group, not knowing where he's going to go. I'd be curious for your thoughts. I really struggled. I don't know if I like it or not. Obviously, I mean, in our league, he's been 8-18-1-1. I mean, this guy has been similar to like TJ Watt. Guy is just absolutely dominated ever since he stepped foot in the league. I guess you aren't as concerned about that.
Yeah, I mean, I considered that. I just feel like, I don't know. I just feel like I couldn't not have him in tier 1. Just as far, I mean, you mentioned it, just how dominant he's been. And even though it felt like he had a down season this past year, as far as our league, it was still towards the top in fantasy points per game and in total points even. So, and he still had decent sack numbers at the defensive tackle position. So I don't know how much longer he's going to play, but I just felt like as long as he is playing, he deserves to be in tier 1.
I mean, if it was a redraft ranking, he'd be 1. But,
right.
We're looking at it from a dynasty perspective, which makes it, all the more difficult. So he was the toughest, him and Hayward, but I think Donald a lot more so. Talk to me about Jalen Carter. I am shocked you have him. I mean, this guy, obviously during the draft process, this guy was heralded as, a game changer, similar to the likes of what Donald has been able to do in the league. This tells me that you think that he's not as good as advertised.
I don't know. Yeah, I just I feel like he's a big name, and he was really hyped in the draft process. What just concerns me is I just don't know what the Philadelphia Eagles philosophy is. They really seem to rotate these defensive tackles and just their D-line in general, and I feel like nobody can really get things going. Wasn't overly impressed with his numbers as a rookie. Now, I get that defensive tackles take a long time, but as hyped up as he was, thought he was going to have a little bit better stats and a little bit better of a rookie season. But that's not to say there's not room for him to jump up, but that's kind of the thinking there. But I really just, the philosophy, maybe that changes. They do have a new defensive coordinator coming in. So if they change and keep the defensive line on the field, that would be better. But, I mean, you just got, Fletcher Cox is still there. Not sure how much longer he's going to play. His former Georgia teammate and Davis is also there.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, 6 sacks is nothing to sneeze at.
No, yeah, 6 sacks. But as far as like the tackle numbers, he, little. I mean, I know he had 33, but
no, they're lower. No, and obviously Kobe did have a better year. So, so you really like Barmore. You said you wanted to talk about him.
Yeah, I just Barmore's been an interesting player. Just his pedigree with the Patriots, it took a little bit to kind of figure it out and get to see Christian Barmore. But then seeing him break out this year, really, really liked what I've seen out of him. And this is kind of more so of, I think, what people thought they could get out of him. But I mean, in our league, he finished, I don't know what his overall finish was, but, 8.5 sacks, 64 tackles, total 39 of them solo, averaged almost 20
points. He finished
points.
at 6. Defensive tackle 6 in our league.
Yeah. Almost had 20 points a game as well. So I was really impressed by the season that he put out. And I think, based on his age, there could be more of this to come out of him.
So, and what's your take on Matabuke? You think that he's just going to keep rolling this downhill?
Yeah, I think this could have been the big breakout for him. Now, we've also seen guys just perform in the contract year and kind of go away.
That's my concern.
That right, and that easily could happen. But I think, I think that this was his breakout, and things will roll downhill, and he'll keep playing at this level. I just hope that he goes to a team that fits what he wants to do and plays in a good scheme that allows him to excel.
Well, and you and I both like Brown. Brown's got a huge tackle floor. I want to see more sacks out of him, but what he was able to do from a tackle standpoint is, I believe I believe he did a record for the amount of tackles he had this year.
Pretty sure he had
103 total tackles. I mean, that's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's repeatable, but I mean, guy, he's actually been a lot. I mean, again, I want to see more sacks out of the guy. That is kind of disappointing. He'll be 26 years old, but he's been defensive tackle 3, 17, 33, and 33 in our league. Not too bad. So I think he could easily go into tier 1 next year, depending on what happens.
Yeah, he definitely could. And I mean, to get there, you just got to increase those sack numbers. Curious to know, if the Panthers offense gets better and can stay on the field a little bit more, I think his opportunity for the tackles goes down.
That's true.
Maybe he'll start turning some of those tackles into sacks and still help you in that point totals. But I am definitely intrigued by him. He's a guy that you and I have talked about, quite a bit off of the show here and have liked in our fantasy league.
All right, Joe. So who do you got rounding out for tier 1?
All righty. In tier 1, at number 6, Aaron Donald. 5, Chris Jones. 4, Quinnen Williams. 3, Christian Wilkins. 2, DeForest Buckner. And at number 1, Jeffrey Simmons.
Oh, my goodness. You said I wouldn't like it. I didn't realize you put him at number 1. Holy cow. we got to talk about that one. Wow. All right. So for me at number 5, I've got Jalen Carter. 4, Chris Jones. 3, DeForest Buckner. 2, Christian Wilkins. And 1, Quinnen Williams. Man, oh, man. Were you not kidding, Joe? I got to – So Jeffrey Simmons is number 1. What is the reasoning behind this? Because I have him in our league. He's going to be 27. He was defensive tackle 22, 13, 5, and then 17. You must have some juicy PFF stat that you're going to give me.
I don't have any juicy PFF stats.
Okay.
But I mean, I just think you mentioned what he was 5 in 22-23 a year.
He was 5 in the 2021-2022. He was 13 the year not this past year, but the year before, and then he was defensive tackle 22 this year. Right.
So I mean, he was 5 when he played a full season, and then even the short. I mean, he had played 12 games this past season, 5.5 sacks in those 12 games. And he was averaging 20.6 points in our league over 12 games. I mean, if he plays a full season, I think he would have been easily probably the number 1, had a chance at the number 1 spot at the defensive tackle ranking this season. And I just like how consistent he's been with the sack number. I mean, you mentioned it when he had his best season. He had 8.5. Then he had 7.5 in the 15 games the next year. And then this past year, he had 5.5 and 12. So, I mean, pretty close to half a sack per game that he played in. So he would have been, I mean, if he played the full 7 games, he would have been right there, 8.5 and 9, similar to that sack total that he had when he was number 5 the tackle.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I just feel like this guy's underrated and not a lot of people talk about him, man.
I guess so. Now he's his name is now etched in stone, and now people will know where you stand on him, and people should know who he is. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, and a lot of people like Quinnen Williams and talk about Quinnen Williams a lot.
Yeah, why don't you like him?
I do like Quinnen Williams just from our league in the fantasy standpoint. I feel like what stood out was I didn't like his sack numbers at the end of the day to be able to put him up there.
I understand that, but I mean, he's 26 years old, going to be close to 27. He's been defensive tackle 7, 5, 11, and 5. I mean, talk about consistency. His sacks have been 7, 6, 12, and 5.5.
Yeah, why did he take such a dip in sacks this year?
Well, he still had pressures, though. You heard what Salah had to say, that sacks is a very overrated measure, and he was still impacting the game. So we can't take that fully into account.
But that doesn't those pressures don't give me fantasy points.
Yeah, boy. Wilkins is an underrated guy, too. I highly consider Wilkins above Quinnen Williams. He's a guy that doesn't get talked about. In our league, he's been defensive tackle 5, 1, and 3. The thing that put me over the edge is he's 28 years old.
Yeah. I mean, you want to talk about the model of consistency at the defensive tackle position. I mean, hard to look at Wilkins and DeForest Buckner.
But you look, his sack total wasn't very high, though, Joe. I mean, he had 9 sacks this year. Before that, 3.5, 5.5, 1.5, 2. He's just a huge tackle getter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So based on that logic, Williams it gets more sacks than Wilkins.
Yeah, he does. I guess just outside of that, I mean, I was just looking at the overall, consistency and fantasy points and everything, and Wilkins was better in terms of that. So
when you and I agree on Chris Jones, I like Buckner. I think Buckner might be one of the most underrated defensive players out there. Guy just doesn't get talked about, but it looks like you feel the same. You had him at number 2.
Correct. Yeah, definitely. I feel like nobody talks about him, and just was looking over the last few years in our league in terms of the stats, fantasy points per game, and everything. This guy's been towards the top the last few years, and just been the model of consistency. So I felt like I had to put him at 2.
1, 4, 6, and 2. That's incredible. I mean, that rivals Aaron Donald, to be honest. I mean, obviously not as good as Donald, but I mean that's right up there with him and Cam Hayward as far as dominance of the position.
Most definitely.
So that does it for our top 24 defensive tackle rankings with tiers. I hope that as you watch this video, you have noticed, as Joe and I have, this defensive tackle group is pretty rich. There's a lot of talent in here. I feel like the defensive tackles don't get enough credit that they deserve. And if you're an IDP league, a lot of times they'll just have you play in a a defensive line league where you combine defensive ends and defensive tackles, so you don't have to play defensive tackles. For Joe and I in our league that we play, you got to start 2. And, these guys are very valuable, and there is a talent gap. And there's a lot of guys even at the bottom end. They say that it's only top heavy. I think there's a lot of guys even at the bottom of the bottom 24 here that I think are valuable. Wouldn't you agree, Joe?
I do. I think we both considered other guys that could have made this, but we held off on it. So, and there's a lot of other younger guys too that we probably could have mentioned and thrown in here, but it's just I don't know. The young guys were just tough to put in there because they don't have production, but they got that potential.
If you're new to the channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell. We're going to continue doing our Dynasty rankings with tiers coming up. We got linebackers, cornerbacks, and safeties. You're not going to want to miss that. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.